Hello, Iowa State. All right. My name is Ashton Ayers, and I'm a student here at Iowa State. I'm a soldier, and I'm an organizer on campus with Students for Bernie. Yeah. Since February, we've been organizing and tabling and fighting for our future. You can support us by following us on social media at ISU for Bernie, and if you're a student, you can join in the student organization database online. In just the past couple weeks, nearly 200 students have signed up to join the political revolution. I grew up on college campuses at Indian Hills in Ottumwa, at William Penn in Oskaloosa, and at Drake in Des Moines. My mom had me soon after she finished high school, and she raised my brother and I by herself, working a few low-wage jobs at a time to keep us above water while trying to put herself through school. She gave it everything she had, and because of her hard work, she made the honor roll while raising two ornery boys by herself. But she took on a student loan debt that she can never repay. Just last week, the Board of Regents announced that they will be budgeting another 4% raise in the cost of tuition because our regressive state legislature refuses to fund our education. That ain't right. That ain't right. This is unaffordable and devastating to students. Iowa State University was founded on the back of the Land Grant Act on a promise to provide an avenue to education for the working class, but the working people are shut out by high costs and high interest rates. Even with help from the GI Bill, I've taken on debt that will burden me after graduation. Those that choose to pursue education should be welcomed with open arms. We need Bernie Sanders' College for All plan in America. Because no single mother should have to take on crushing debt, and no young man should have to go to war to get an education. I first heard Bernie Sanders speak in the basement of a church in Des Moines in the fall of 2014, and it knocked me out because I was 17, and I had never heard a politician challenge the underlying assumptions about power and politics. That day highlighted to me the need to create a diverse, intersectional movement rooted in the concept of solidarity for economic, racial, social, and environmental justice. We all have a moral responsibility to work for justice in our communities now. We all need to answer the call of the political revolution to fight for our right to health care, education, housing, and the Green New Deal. In Ames, you can join organizations fighting now. The Heart of Iowa DSA, the Ames Tenants Union, CCI, numerous student groups that are fighting now, and they need your help. Organize at your school, organize in your workplace, get organized, be deliberate, and be the change. A better world is possible. So allow me to introduce the man who can make it possible, the next president of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
I hate to let you down.
This is not Bernie.
Bernie! Bernie! Bernie!
I'm Bernie. This guy, anyone know who this guy is? Did you ever eat Ben and Jerry's ice cream? Now, I know I am reasonably famous, but compared to this guy who gave the country Cherry Garcia, what can I say? All right, so Ben just came in about 12 seconds ago, so Ben will take the stage and I'll be on in a minute. Okay, thanks.
We weren't quite sure whether I'd get here on time, but you know, before Bernie, I used to be the most famous guy in Vermont. And I am just so happy to give that title over to Bernie. You know, ice cream is good, but a president of the United States who truly stands for justice in all its flavors, that is euphoric. You know, euphoria is a high-minded word, but the reason why Bernie is going to be able to transform Washington is that he's down to earth. He has a vision, and it's pretty simple. What would our country be like if it was actually working for the benefit of regular people instead of corporations? But he has no delusions, and that is the thing that sets Bernie apart in this field. He's progressive, and he's been in Washington, in the House and in the Senate, for 30 years. He understands the cesspool of what is our political system today, and he's the guy who therefore will be able to flush the crap down the drain. You know, I don't really see Bernie as a politician in the usual sense of the word. He is a fighter for justice, social, racial, and economic, and he uses politics as a means to that end. You know, before Bernie, I never had a mayor that represented my values, or a congressman, or a senator. And I just can't tell you how incredible it is to actually have a representative that represents you. So I just want to give you a taste of what's gotten me so excited about seeing this guy in the White House. I've been his constituent for 40 years. So I've seen how steadfast and constant he is, and focused. For the last 4 decades, he's worked to improve the quality of life for regular people and those who are oppressed. You know, way back in 1980, that's like before you were born, that's like ancient history, Ben & Jerry's was just starting out, and Bernie won an improbable victory against a machine, old crony, Democratic mayor, and he won by 10 votes, and he became my mayor in Burlington. His first act was to shut down plans to privatize the shore of Lake Champlain with expensive condominiums. And instead, he turned it into a public park that was open to everybody. When he became my congressman, he personally took busloads of senior citizens over the border into Canada so that they could get their prescription drugs at decent prices. And then more and more congressmen started doing the same thing. He co-founded the Progressive Caucus in the House when he was there in the House, and it's now become the largest values-based caucus. He voted against NAFTA before voting against NAFTA was cool. He voted against going to war in Iraq twice. Then, in 2007, he defeated the richest man in Vermont to become my senator. As a senator, he forced the first ever audit of the Federal Reserve, which revealed $16 trillion in near zero interest loans in the wake of the financial crash and numerous conflicts of interest. Then he led a successful effort to stop the so-called chain CPI, which would have reduced the benefits that are paid to people on Social Security and veterans. And just last September, he introduced the Stop Bezos Act. That stands for Stop Bad Employers by Zeroing Out Subsidies. It requires large employers that are paying lousy wages to reimburse the federal government for the food stamps and the Medicaid benefits that their employees need in order to get by. A month after he introduced that legislation, Jeff Bezos raised the minimum wage at Amazon to $15 an hour. And now, I mean, just in these last few weeks, we've been reading about how it was Bernie who brought Republicans and Democrats together to pass a resolution to get the U.S. out of the war in Yemen. You know, when Bernie ran for president the first time, and he said he wasn't going to take any big money, I thought it was a mistake. I thought that he would never be able to raise enough money for his campaign. And then I understood where he was coming from. He realized that if there weren't enough people willing to donate small amounts of money to his campaign, he didn't want to be president, because then once he became president, he wouldn't have the army of people that he needs to transform Washington. So, what do I think about Bernie, the man? Well, he has always been consistent. He has always walked the talk. You know, this is political season. A lot of people are going to be coming by talking and saying a lot of good things, but he's done it. He is those things. He never wavers. He has a clear vision for how to make America kind again. And he continually comes up with innovative ways to do it. He's not a fancy guy. He's pretty down home, no airs. And I like his hairstyle. That's always the same, too. He doesn't go with the trends. He sets the trends. Small donor-funded campaigns, universal health care, publicly funded colleges and universities. Bernie, the trendsetter? Who knew? He's already leading the country. Look at all the candidates that are following him. Thanks a lot. Great to be here. You guys are beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, let me thank Ben for that, for his friendship for decades, and also tell you that this guy is a revolutionary in his own right. And it's not only that when he and Jerry Greenfield were head of Ben & Jerry's, a company they founded in Burlington, what they did is not only make great ice cream, they did something different. And what they showed, and this is enormously important, that you could run a very profitable, successful business and not be a greedy, anti-environmental, anti-worker. And out of what Ben & Jerry did, more or less, came a movement of progressive business people in this country who said, yeah, we want to make money, but we're also going to treat our workers with dignity. We're going to treat the environment with respect. When we talk about, and I know an important issue here in Iowa, we'll talk about in a moment, protecting family-based agriculture, they made a very determined decision to buy significant amounts of milk from farmers in Vermont. Didn't have to do that. Could have saved money doing something else, but that's what they did. And they have been leading on the environment. So, Ben, thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you. I just want to say one thing.
Get out of here. Go on. Good.
My one thing. He's anxious to go on, I know. But I was doing an interview with someone, and they were saying, why are you supporting Bernie? And I was saying that he is a fighter for justice. And I realized that, and that he has this passion for justice. And I realized that, yeah, I have that passion for justice. And the best thing I could do to achieve justice, economic, racial, social, in this country is to support this guy for president. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Let me thank Mississippi Jake for the great music. Let me thank Mike Fusello for trying to get you guys involved in the campaign. Michael, thank you. Let me thank Ashton Ayers and Alexa Rodriguez and wasn't Andy Wolf, I think, was it? Yeah. Was Andy, okay, for his remarks. What I want to say is that politics is not quite as complicated as it is made out to be. You know, you hear the media, and the media will talk about somebody raised a lot of money today, and somebody attacked somebody else today, and a poll showed this and that today, and somebody said something dumb at Iowa State. I hope it's not me, and that'll be all over the world, you know. Or somebody slipped on a banana peel, you know, and oh my God, front page story. All right, what is politics about? In a real sense, I want you to think about this. Number one, it is an analysis in your own mind about what's going on in your world, in the society. For example, front pages of the paper today says the economy is booming, unemployment is down. Unemployment is down. I want you to think, does that mean that the economy is booming for ordinary people? Okay, you got to think about that. And you got to do something that the media often doesn't do, that Congress doesn't do, that most politicians don't do, is go into your own hearts and to your own minds and say, what is going on in my life? Now, here you heard from some young people who made a point about one very important issue, and we'll talk about a dozen of them. What they said is they committed a terrible, terrible crime. They tried to get a higher education and left school deeply in debt. The mantra of our campaign is twofold. Number one, it is to think big, not small. Think out of the box, not what's on TV tonight. And number two, it is that statement over there, which is more than a bumper sticker, although I think it is going to become a bumper sticker. And that is not me, us. And what does that mean? All right, let's deal with those two issues. Number one, Donald Trump will be on television today, say, hey, the economy is booming, best economy in the history of the world, so forth and so on. All right? And then your job is to say, okay, what is going on in the economy? Okay, so let's just go right through it right now. Start off with the little people. Okay, we live in a nation. Babies are being born today. People are dying today. All right, what's going on in the country? How are we doing in terms of how we treat children in this country? We're doing great? Anyone have any thoughts on it? Well, that's one way of looking at it. All right, but the fact is that we have, this is America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We have one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Roughly speaking, about 20% of our kids are in poverty. In minority communities, that number is substantially higher than that, okay? So if you look at a nation which is great, you kind of think that that nation will be treating its most vulnerable people in a great way. Well, we're surely not treating our children in a great way when we have so many kids living in poverty. Well, okay, in Iowa and in Vermont and all over this country, you got mom and dad working, okay? And when mom and dad are working and they have a child who is 2 or 3, that child has to go to child care, right? How are we doing with child care in this country? Terrible, okay? Now, all of you know, and I suspect we have some psychology majors here, that the, that the ages of 0 through 4 are the most important ages for human development intellectually and emotionally. And yet in America, we have a situation where many, many working families cannot find quality, affordable childcare. You got kids sitting in front of dumb television sets with people who have not been trained adequately, and in fact, childcare workers make abysmal wages, and they don't get the respect that they need. So we are a nation that does not do well for young working parents with kids, nor for children in general. Then we go to the next issue. Kids getting a little bit older, out of childcare. Kid goes to school. Most children go to public schools. I was in Detroit, a few weeks ago, and talked to somebody there who says there are hundreds of vacancies in the Detroit public school system. You know why? Because they don't pay teachers a living wage. Some of you may have seen just a few days ago in South Carolina, not the most progressive state in America. In North Carolina, teachers went out in protest because their kids are not getting the education that they deserve. Okay, and that's true all over this country. And we got too many kids who are dropping out of school, and that's another story. And we go on into college, and you're at a great university right here. But what you heard, which is true all over this country, is A, we got hundreds of thousands of bright young people who cannot afford to even go to college. And you got more and more people beginning to think, is it a good investment for me to get a higher education? Maybe I should go out and get a job after high school, which is, understandable given what's going on. And then you heard today, and it's true all over this country, young people graduating school, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt. You want to go to medical school? I'll never forget talking to a young doctor in Burlington who graduated medical school, now doing primary health care. She graduated $300,000 in debt. And I said, my God, I can't believe that. Then I was actually in Des Moines a few years ago. And a young woman who graduated dental school was $400,000 in debt. All right. So when I ask you to think big, not small, what I ask you to say is don't take that as something that's normal or sane. It is insane. You should not be punished because you want to get a higher education. And here is the irony there. We live in a competitive global economy. So not just for you or you or you do we want you to get an education, it's for the nation. We cannot compete effectively in the global economy in a rapidly changing economy and technology unless we have the best educated workforce. 30 years ago, we did have the best educated workforce. Today, we do not. Okay, and one of the reasons is that many people are hesitant about getting a college degree given the cost. So what does that mean? What it means is that a lot of people now are very nervous about what's happening to their lives. If you graduate college or graduate school, $100,000 in debt, what does it mean? What does it mean? You tell me. That's right. It means, don't laugh. No, he's absolutely right. It means if you get married, you and your wife may decide, hey, we've got a $100,000 bill. We can't afford to have kids right now. You may not be able to buy a house. You may not be able to buy a car. All right, so there's a tremendous burden being placed on millions of people in this country for the crime of trying to get a higher education. Okay, getting back to the point that the economy is presumably booming. What's the minimum wage in the state of Iowa? Anyone know? Okay, and it's lower then. All right. I have talked to a lot of people in Iowa and all over this country. Does anybody, I was at a meeting yesterday with a woman who has 2 kids. She makes $11 an hour. Do you think anybody can make it on $11 an hour with 2 kids? It turns out that half of the people in this country, half of the workers, are living paycheck to paycheck. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Half of the workers are living paycheck to paycheck. Do you know what that means? What it means if you're living, and I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck. It means that if your car breaks down, you can't get to work. If you can't get to work, you get fired. If you get fired, you cannot take care of your kids. Do you know why there is so much stress in America? It is precisely for reasons like that. People are struggling every single day, living under enormous stress. And in the worst cases, it's not only stress, it is despair. We are living in a moment in American history where for the first time in a very long time, if ever, life expectancy is going down for the third straight years. Can you imagine? Life expectancy is going down. And that's because what doctors call diseases of despair. And by that, they mean people give up on life. They turn to drugs and opioids. They turn to alcohol. And then they turn to suicide. And we're seeing that in rural parts of this country big time. So when we talk about the economy, it's not just the relatively low unemployment rate. It is what is happening to people's lives. And a heck of a lot of people are struggling. But you should know, when I was a kid, when I was your age, it was at that point possible for one worker in a family, in those days often the man, to work 40 hours a week and bring in enough money to take care of the family. One worker. Today you need two workers to do that, and in many cases those two workers don't have the kind of disposable income that one person did 40 or 50 years ago. So what does thinking big, not small means? It means analyzing what's going on around you and then saying, well, where do we want to go as a nation? Not a hard question. People will disagree. It's where philosophy comes in. What kind of nation should we become? So let me tell you a little bit about the nation that I think we should be. And Ben Cohn touched on a little bit. I believe that unlike Trump, who is running a government based on racism, sexism, homophobia, religious bigotry, xenophobia, trying to divide us up as a people. Hey, you're different than me. The color of your skin is different, or your sexual orientation is different. I believe that we bring our people together around an agenda that works for all of us. And I believe as a top priority, and I want to congratulate the young people here, because your generation, it turns out, is the most progressive generation in the history of the United States of America. Anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobia, anti-xenophobia, anti-religious bigotry. And I want to thank your generation for that. But I also want to point out that your generation, unless we change it, and I intend to work with you to change it, will have a lower standard of living than your parents for the first time in the modern history of this country. And I want you to think about that. All right. So that's right. Very upset about that. All right, so what do? What is thinking big, not small, and what is not me, us about? All right, let's think big. All right, good. We'll start right there. Just what I was going to say, all right? In Iowa, in Vermont, and all across this country, you got people working 2 or 3 jobs because the wages they receive are not livable. That's a fact. You got millions of people who are paying 40, 50, 60% of their limited incomes on housing. And if you pay half your income on housing, what do you got left over? All right? So let's go through it. Let's just talk about an agenda which speaks to the basic human rights of all Americans. All right? If you work 40 hours a week, you should not live in poverty. Now, when I was in Iowa in the last campaign, and I came here, and I said, you know, we should raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. What my opponents said is, Bernie, you're crazy. You want to more than double the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25 right now. Can't be done. Well, because we came to Iowa and we got about half the vote here on caucus night, what Iowa showed America is that idea was not quite such a crazy idea. And it turns out that over the last several years, 6 states in this country have passed $15 an hour minimum wage. And I believe the U.S. House of Representatives will do that in the next month or two. And by the way, that means the vote is then going to come to the Senate, and I need you to work on Senators Ernst and Grassley and let them know. Well, let them know, but we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay, I think we can turn them around, but tell them that people can't make it on $8, $9, or $10 an hour. All right. So first thing we're saying in an economy is that we are not a poor nation. Now, if we were a poor nation, we would take a different perspective on things. We are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. Anybody who works 40 hours a week should earn at least, not that $15 is a lot of money, but at least $15 an hour. And by the way, when we talk about wages, we're going to end this nonsense that women make 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. They deserve the full dollar. And when we talk about workers' rights, what you know and I know is that we're not going to grow the middle class unless we grow the trade union movement in this country. And we are going to make it easier for workers to join unions, not harder. Okay? And then when we talk, now here's my point. I'm talking about not creating a society where everybody has a big Cadillac and a multi-million-dollar home. We are talking about basic human rights. Okay, and let me tell you this. Back in 1944, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave a State of the Union address, which never got a whole lot of attention. And what he said, in so many words, is we have a Bill of Rights, which is a very important document. It guarantees you freedom of speech. It guarantees you freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and we all appreciate and support that. And he said, back in 1944, we got to go a little bit further. And we need the government to guarantee economic rights, not just political rights. Because if you get sick and you end up in a hospital and you come out and you're bankrupt, you got a serious problem. So what we have got to do is focus on economic rights. Now, one of the economic rights, one of the human rights that we are focusing this campaign on is that health care is a right, not a privilege. Now, for the corporate media, for my friends in Congress, this seems like a radical idea. Is it a radical idea? No. How many major countries on earth are there that do not guarantee health care to all people as a right? Anyone know? One. You're living in it. Understand that. All right. I live 50 miles away from Canada. And in Canada, if you end up with cancer and you end up in the hospital with massive treatment, do you know how much your bill is? That's right. Okay, and other countries have different systems. Canada's more or less a single-payer system. The UK has a different system. France has a different system. But essentially, all of the major countries on earth understand that if you're rich or whether you're poor, you should have the right to go into a doctor's office when you're sick and not hesitate. We lose some 30,000 people a year because they hesitate to go to the doctor because they can't afford it or the deductibles or copayments are too high. That is not acceptable. Now, you're going to see a whole lot about the debate over Medicare for all, but what you should know is that the insurance companies and the drug companies and others in the healthcare industry have teamed together to do everything they can to defeat us, and I can understand that. I can understand that when insurance companies and drug companies make billions of dollars in profits every year, when their CEOs make millions of dollars in compensation, they like the status quo. Okay? And we're going to tell them very clearly that when 34 million people have no health insurance and more are underinsured, when we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs at a time when the top 10 drug companies made $69 billion in profit last year. That is no longer acceptable to us and the American people. So we have an agenda that some may think is radical. I don't. It's an agenda that speaks to the needs of working families and not just the 1%. And we have, as part of a rigged economy, we have a corrupt political system. And I want all of you to be thinking about that. You're going to see a lot of ads on television. Some of it's going to come from the insurance companies and the drug companies. Some of it will come from the Republican Party. But understand that many of those ads will be paid for by the wealthiest people in this country, because we have a political system made worse by the Citizens United Supreme Court decision that allows billionaires to put in as much money as they want to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. Our job in politics, in economics, it's to create an economy that works for all of us. In politics, it is to create a political system based on one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. And one of the things about our corrupt political system that really, really bothers me, as somebody who has run for office many, many times in Vermont, sometimes I've lost, more times I've won, but I've lost. But it never occurred to me, nor do I think it occurs to most candidates, to say, let's see, I'm strong here, I'm weak there. How do I keep those people from voting? And what you're seeing all over this country is massive efforts on the part of cowardly Republican governors to suppress the vote. Can you, again, think big. If somebody is a coward, you know, what democratic politics, the politics of a democracy is, you're going to hear from different candidates. You'll hear from people in the Democratic Party, many of them very good people. You'll hear from Republicans. Listen to what they have to say, and you make the decision as to how you want to vote. But it is grotesque and disgusting that we have Republican governors and attorneys general all over this country who are making it harder for poor people, for people of color, and for young people to vote. That is not what American democracy is supposed to be about. So what we are going to do in the White House is make a very simple position. And that is, if you're 18 years of age in America and you're a citizen of this country, you are entitled to vote. End of discussion. And when we talk about human rights, we have to talk about environmental rights as well. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, Donald Trump and I have a few differences of opinion. But maybe the most profound difference is that Trump is maintaining the myth that climate change is a hoax and, in fact, is working overtime to make sure that we have more carbon emissions. Trump also made the profound remark, you may have remember a month or so ago, that wind turbines cause cancer. Did you all hear that one? And he is, you know, a profound scientist, somebody who's researched the issue for years, and uniquely came up with that conclusion. All right, well, my views are a little bit different. And let's, again, think big, not small. And when we think big, what we understand is, at the end of the day, what is more important than the preservation of planet Earth? It's kind of a significant issue, don't you think? And you all know what's going on. You're seeing the increase in drought and flooding and extreme weather disturbances, the acidification of the ocean, rising sea levels. And here's what the scientists tell us. I know many of you are familiar with these reports. They say that we have 12 years, which is no time at all, to transform our energy system, or else we're going to see irreparable damage to this planet. I want you to think about that. You know, one of the things about life, at least what I believe, is you can't be just about yourself. You got to be thinking about other people, and not only other people around you here, you got to be thinking about the kids and their kids, future generations. You know, the Native American people taught us that you think 7 generations forward, all right? Well, we got 12 years forward, and that means we have a moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for future generations. And what does that mean? It means that we have to have the courage to take on the fossil fuel industry, who insanely believe that short-term profits are more important than the future of the planet. Okay, what does it mean? Again, and by the way, here in Iowa, you're doing a good job in wind. You got 35% of your electricity now coming from wind. That is really good, okay? You're one of the leaders in the country. But it is not hard. We know it has to be done, and that is to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies like wind, solar, and other technologies, all right? There are a couple of other issues that are out there. What's going on with our criminal justice system? A fine system based on justice? It is profoundly broken, and I want you all to be asking yourselves, how does it happen that in America we have more people in jail than any other country on earth? China, 4 times our size, we have more people in jail than a communist authoritarian country in China. We need real criminal justice reform. And that means a number of things. That means investing in young people so that they have the education and the jobs they need, rather than investing in more jails and incarceration. And you know what else it means? That we've made some success. We've made some progress on this in the last 4 years. When I was in Iowa 4 years ago, I said, you know what? We got to end this war on drugs and legalize marijuana. Well, once again, they said that's too radical an idea, can't happen. Well, state after state is doing precisely that. And you know why? Because over a long period of time, there are millions of people in this country who have been arrested for possession of marijuana. Occasionally, they've gone to jail, but mostly what's happened is they have a criminal record. What happens to you when you got a criminal record and you're going out getting a job? The employer says, well, hey, thanks for coming in. I think we got somebody else in mind, all right? So we have got to end the so-called war on drugs. We've got to end private prisons and detention centers. We have got to end cash bail. Do you know what that is? Do you know, and I got to tell you, I didn't know this until a few years ago, that as we speak, there are hundreds of thousands of people in jail this moment. Do you know why they're in jail? Because they're poor and they can't afford bail. That makes sense? I don't think so. All right. Then we have to deal with another issue that's out there, which Trump has been demonizing, all right? And that is the issue of immigration, all right? We have some 10 million undocumented people in this country. What Trump is trying to do is demonize them, which is what demagogues always do. You pick on a minority and you demonize them. My view is that we need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. That we need legal status for the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And that we need to treat people, some cases who have walked 1,000 miles with babies, When they get to the border, we treat them with respect and dignity, and we do not snatch babies out of the arms of their mothers. Now, having said all of that, I want to get to what that sign means. And thank the people whose arms must be getting very tired for holding it up. What does it mean? You tell me. What does not me, us mean? Why is that an important statement? Yep, but this is what it means. Let me tell you what I suspect no other candidate will tell you. And by the way, I want to say this about the Democratic candidates. I know many of them are in the Senate, and they're all friends of mine. And you got some really good people there, and I want you to hear what they have to say. And I will tell you this also, that at the end of the day, now needless to say, I hope I win, they hope they win, all right? But at the end of the day, I think you're going to see all of the candidates coming together around the winner to make sure that Donald Trump is defeated. But let me tell you what those signs mean. It means that no matter who is elected president, not the most honest, smartest, best-intentioned person, the truth is, that person cannot do it alone, okay? And I'll tell you why. And this is something you don't see on TV too much. And that is the power structure of America is such that you have insurance companies and drug companies. You have Wall Street owning assets equivalent, 6 Wall Street banks owning assets equivalent to 54% of the GDP of America. 6, okay? You have fossil fuel companies making billions and lying about climate change. You have the military-industrial complex getting huge cost overruns and making incredible amounts of money at a time when we spend more than the next 10 nations combined on the military. So here is the point. In order to, what I want to do, and obviously, is I want to win the Democratic nomination with your help. All right? I want to defeat Donald Trump. That goes without saying. But I want to do something else. And I wouldn't be running for president unless that was exactly what I want to do. I want to work with you to transform this country and our national priorities. All right? But one person cannot do it alone. And I want you all to think about American history. Think about 100, 150 years ago when workers were forced to work 15, 18 hours a day, when they could be fired arbitrarily, when children were working in factories and working in the fields. And working people stood up and you said, we will not accept that anymore. We as workers want to be treated with respect and dignity. We're going to form unions and we're going to engage in collective bargaining. Because we can't do it alone. We need to come together to sit down with our employer and negotiate a decent contract, decent working conditions, and decent wages. That's what the history of the trade union movement has been about. I want you to think about the history of the civil rights movement. Do you think it was just Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the great American leaders in our history? It wasn't just him alone, and he would tell you it was not him alone. It was millions of people coming together to say that we will no longer accept racism and discrimination in the United States of America. And when the American people stood up, black and white and Latino, stood up and said, you know what, this is insane to tell people because of the color of their skin they cannot cast a ballot in Alabama or Mississippi. We're going to end that. And they did. Okay? And you think about the women's movement. You all know that a little over 100 years ago, women in America did not have the right to vote. If you got a divorce, you got no property or were treated unfairly. Women could not go out and do the jobs that their hearts wanted them to do. They couldn't get the education they wanted. And that changed not by anything in Washington. It changed because women and their male allies stood up and said clearly that women will no longer be second-class citizens in the United States of America. And on that issue, God knows we still have a long way to go, because we're seeing state after state, including your state, working very hard to try to deny a woman the right to control her own body. And we're going to change that. And the same story with the gay community. I am old enough to remember when people were deadly afraid to tell their friends or their parents that they were gay. And it took incredible struggle, incredible heroism. People were beaten, humiliated, intimidated, till finally enough people said in this country that you have a right to love anybody regardless of their gender. Okay? And that is a result of people standing up. So what not me, us means, it's not just a slogan. It is an understanding that no president can do it alone, because you got the power of Wall Street, you got the power of the corporate media, you got the power of the insurance companies, the drug companies, the military-industrial complex, the fossil fuel industry, the whole 1%. All right? No president alone can do it. The way change happens is when millions of people stand up and they look around them and they say, you know what? There's something wrong when 3 families in America own more wealth than the bottom half of our people. Something wrong when the top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 92%. Something wrong when 49% of all new income today goes to the top 1%. And when people begin to look around them and say, you know what? As many of you say, that ain't right. That ain't right, okay? And people begin to stand up and get involved in the political process. That is the way change has always taken place, and that is the way change will take place today. Now, all of you know that here in Iowa, you're in a very special position, and I'm always impressed to the degree that the people of this small state have accepted that responsibility and take their first in the country caucus very, very seriously. Many people go to hear all kinds of speakers and are thinking about the issues and thinking hard about who they want to support. And I respect that enormously and appreciate that. But you have what happens here in Iowa at the caucus is enormously important. We came to Iowa, whoops, I always do that, never fails. Last time around, I came to Iowa, we were 3% in the polls. On caucus night, we ended up with 50% of the vote. All right? So I am very grateful. I'm very grateful to the people of Iowa, but you have an enormous responsibility. So I hope very much that given the special role that Iowa plays, that all of you will get heavily involved in the political process. I hope you will participate in our campaign, which is trying to wage a political revolution in this country. Not just win an election, but wage a political revolution. And you can do it. We need people. I'm very proud. The media made a big deal that we raised a lot of money, and we did, and that's good. We need that. But you know what's more important to me? That we now have over 1 million people in every state in this country who are prepared to volunteer on this campaign. So with your help, with your use of social media, with your knocking on doors, with your talking to your friends, and don't let your friends tell you that politics is all bullshit and they don't have the time to get involved. Tell them you don't want to hear them moaning and groaning about their student debt or their $10 an hour wage or they can't afford housing. And tell them stop moaning and groaning and get involved in the political process and help transform this country. That is what this campaign is about. And with your help, that's what we could do. Thank you all very much.